Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are back with another Neurodiversity Stories, and we have an absolutely incredible guest today. We have Katie Forbes, who, by the end of this conversation, I would absolutely implore you to check out the incredible work that Katie's doing, but also her TEDx talk, which we will be sharing a segment of this, and we will be putting the links out. We have put the links out already on our Neurodiversity Stories channel. So please, after this talk, please do reach out, connect and with Katie and see the incredible work that she's doing, and also as well check out the TEDx talk. We will be covering sensitive topics on this, so please do reach out. We will be sharing any links of support on that side of it as well. But I would love you to stick around and welcome Katie Forbes to our conversation today. As always, we can't do this without the support of yourself. So please do, again, let us know where you're tuning in from. If you're watching this live, then please do feel free to chuck in some questions or any of the conversations. And if you're watching this on the replay, then again, please do ask any questions that we have. Secondly, I want to say, or thirdly, actually, I want to say a massive thank you to all of the previous sponsors that has helped this channel grow. We're reaching many different countries. We're reaching in Brazil, in Australia, in America, and Kenya, and so on and so on. So it's really lovely that we're able to get these stories out. So I want to say a massive thank you to our current sponsor that we have, Promova. They are a one-stop solution for all of your language learning needs. And I just want to share with you a little video about our sponsor. From our sponsors, Promova are a one-stop solution for all of your language learning needs. Now, we all know how difficult and challenging it can be to learn a new language, especially if you have dyslexia. Now, this is where they're different, because they are the first platform to introduce a dyslexia mode. And I've got to tell you from firsthand experience, this has been an absolute game changer for me, because I've tried to learn languages for many, many years before in different ways. But the fact that they're now making it available and to assist me in certain ways, I can work through these modules with ease. It has been an absolute game changer. Please do check them out. They are used by over 15 million people across the globe. So they are doing incredible work. There is a 50% discount on the premium version in the link below. Please do click on the link and start your learning language journey.
Picture this. Mastering a new language in just 10 minutes a day. Too good to be true? With Promova, it's a reality. We are a one-stop solution for all your language learning needs. This innovative platform has all the tools to create a unique learning plan based on your goals and interests. With Promova, you can learn languages through bite-sized lessons, anywhere, anytime. Learn vocabulary you'll actually use in real life. Polish your speaking skills and train your ear with audio lessons. Dive into books for full immersion. Need some personalized guidance? Our expert tutors are just one click away, whether you prefer one-on-one or group lessons. Achieve your language learning goals with Promova.
So as always, guys, the link is in the bio in the comment section, so please do check them out. Now, on to our main event, and I'm absolutely so excited to be having this conversation with Katie Forbes on this. But first of all, what I thought I'd do, I did mention about Katie's incredible TEDx talk. Now, what I thought we would do, just so you can kind of get an understanding of her incredible journey, I would just want to share with you a snippet of this. And as mentioned before, we will be highlighting this, and we will be sharing the full link out of this talk. But I just want to introduce you to Katie. We're going to be sharing the segment, and then we're going to be welcoming Katie to the stage. So please do check this out.
In February 2019, I was ready to die because I felt like I didn't belong in this world. I was taken into hospital, and the doctor asked me about my life. Do you have a job? Yes. Are you in debt? No. What's your living situation like? I own my own home with my husband. And how's that relationship? Good. He's great. My whole family are great. He looked puzzled. I'm struggling to understand what's the matter, he said. It sounds like you've got a good life and good people in it. I burst into tears. I had achieved everything I was told I'd not be capable of achieving because of my disability, and I still didn't feel good enough. I'm living a lie, I explained. I'm autistic and exhausted from pretending I'm not. I was the girl in school that spent her breaks hiding in the toilets because I was bullied so badly for being different. It got to the point where I was scared to go outside by myself. But because I was quiet and well-behaved, teachers wouldn't intervene. I concluded my only way to survive was to be like everybody else. So I watched TV constantly at home, observing people, learning the right way to talk and act. I put this into practice and I was welcomed into friend groups. Boys even asked me out. But these friendships and relationships were all built on lies. I thought I'd learned to mask my autism to protect myself, but really, it was damaging my self-worth, teaching me the real me wasn't good enough. So much so, I ended up in hospital questioning whether I should carry on living. This realization was enough to convince me to stay alive that day, and I wanted to dig deeper to better understand why I felt so low. And I realized something. I didn't hate that I was autistic. I didn't hate that I was different. I hated the way others treated me because I was autistic and different. 24 years. It took me 24 years to realize this, 24 years of hating myself. And why?
Incredibly powerful. I'd like you to welcome Katie Forbes. Katie, good morning. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Katie, it would be wrong for me to not kind of just jump straight in and just say what others would have just experienced with the TEDx talk. I remember we connected on a social media platform on LinkedIn a while back, and when you first kind of put out that the TEDx was done, and I watched it, it literally gave me goosebumps, and it took me on a kind of an emotional roller coaster throughout that. Could you explain what was that kind of like, that experience, being able to be so raw to kind of share that? And firstly, I want to say a massive thank you. I mean, it's up to 50,000 views, which is, I'm sure it continue to grow and serve as many people. What was that kind of experience like, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind at all. I guess I should say it was a long journey to get to that point where I could talk about it so rawly and vulnerably. So it was basically in my mid-20s is when I realized, so I was in autistic burnout. I had been masking my autism for decades, and I was just exhausted from it. And I hit this rock bottom, and I guess I had two options. I could give up, or I could learn. I could choose to live. And if I was to do that, I needed to stop running away from my neurodivergence. So I had to get uncomfortable and learn about my autism and also dyslexia, all the things that I'd grown up feeling ashamed of. I found strength in the online autistic community. I found people who were like yourself, like what I'm doing now, is openly talking about their neurodivergent identity, and is not in a way that they were complaining or talking about the negatives. They were actually celebrating this part of themselves in a way that I'd never heard that before. I'd grown up only seeing negative portrayals of autism, dyslexia, and so on. And it was so refreshing, and it gave me the confidence to start talking about what it felt like growing up neurodivergent. So I started what was first like an online blog, just basically me like spilling my thoughts onto paper, and writing social media content about it. And then as I was going through this whole process of discovering who I really am and what I like and what my strengths are. And yeah, it was a process over a few years. And as I was discovering all this, my social media started to take off, and I had thousands of people following my journey. And I saw the power of purely just talking about it. And so when TEDx Aberdeen was accepting applications for movement, that was the theme that year, I thought about my own journey moving from, I guess, hating this part of me to accepting it. And so I applied, and and I got accepted onto the program, and I was able to deliver that talk. But yeah, I didn't just wake up one day loving the fact that I was
absolutely. The people I've spoken to previously that's done something like that, it's a journey. It's an emotional journey of self-discovery as well. Because it's not just you have to be able to deliver a TEDx talk, which is a completely different realm of talking anyway, because you have to, there's certain things, I guess, different criteria in that sense. But again, being comfortable in yourself to what message it is that you want to give out. So I can imagine it was a journey in so many different aspects. Did you find, because you mentioned about growing up kind of, from the negative stereotypes of when we talk about autism and things, did you find that once you found a community, was it quite like an eye-opener in the sense of thinking, oh my goodness, people are actually speaking positive about that? Was that?
Totally. So actually, so if we go back to when my neurodivergence was first identified, the doctor that identified my autism actually convinced my parents not to get me formally diagnosed. And so, yeah, I was 11 years old, and she believed this label would hold me back in life. And she went on to explain that society tends to pigeonhole people with such labels, and she thought this would limit my potential. And my parents were obviously talking to a healthcare professional. This was their profession, is to give advice about things like this. And when they thought of any mention of autism in the media, it was normally very negative, and it was talking about how you can like therapies for autistic children, and they looked to any representation in film and TV, and again, it was always like this very stereotyped version of what it was. So they were thinking, well, I guess that's going to be best. And so they didn't get me formally diagnosed at that point. And then when I finally got a formal diagnosis, when I was 18, and I learned that this is what a doctor had advised my parents not to get me formally diagnosed, and it had been a secret for years. I felt so this must be something really shameful about myself, and something that I shouldn't embrace and celebrate. And so when I discovered people online talking about how like the strengths that came from being autistic and neurodivergent, it was almost earth-shattering. It was like everything that I thought was true, there was another side to that, and there was other views and opinions, and like finding the social model of disability as well, that really there was a shift in perspective there. So yeah, it was amazing finding people who now share my view of what autism and neurodiversity is.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Katie. How do you think society accepts people with autism? Do you think we've when I say accept, do you think it's still kind of uneducated in the sense of what someone with autism is like, or what we're capable of, or whatever that kind of looks like? And has there been significant changes going forward? I mean, what would your kind of thoughts about society with that? I mean, if you're being told not to get formally diagnosed so that it wouldn't dampen your career growth or professionalism or anything else like that, society plays a part in that side of it from what we think someone should be. like?
Yes. So yeah, I've definitely seen a change for the better, but we do still have a long way to go. I remember when I first got a job, I didn't disclose my autism and dyslexia at first because I was scared. I was scared of being discriminated against, of people treating me badly. Early on in my career, I hadn't maybe developed the social skills that I have now, and because I'd grown up being different, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, and so I didn't really know how to talk to people, and I struggled to recognize sarcasm, tone of voice, and all this stuff. So when I was first entering the workplace, it was very obvious that I was different to your typical person. And I was bullied in workplaces, and that's a really sad reality. And people still come up against that now, because there still isn't that understanding there. But what I will say is, when I tried to advocate for myself earlier on in my career, and I asked for some adjustments, and they were just point blank refused, just because there wasn't that level of understanding. They couldn't see. So basically, I was feeling very overwhelmed from traveling at rush hour in commuting to the office, and I looked at my job at the time, and I was like, there's actually no need for me to be in 9 to 5. I could start at 10 and leave at 6, and that means I would not have to face all the crowds and everything. And I came to my manager about that, and I think they just couldn't comprehend why that would make a difference. They couldn't relate to my differences. So it was just, no, you can't do that. We don't do that for anyone. Why should we do that for you? No. And then in contrast, when I was employed last year by my last employers, and I asked for some adjustments, and one of that was the ability to remote work, because there was no need for me to be in an office for that role. They worked with me on that, and they allowed me to work from home. So I have seen there has been positive changes towards acceptance, but I do also still come across people where I'll say, oh, I'm autistic, and they don't know what to say. So they'll often just say phrases I guess they grew up with, and they'll be like, oh, you don't look it, thinking that's a compliment. And it's just like, it's about, oh, it's okay. It's okay for me to look autistic. It's okay for me to be autistic. It's not a negative thing. And I guess it's about giving people the tools and the understanding so they can navigate these conversations.
Absolutely. I think when someone says, that, oh, you don't look autistic, or you sound autistic, or you don't sound dyslexic, it's almost like we're saying it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Even though you are autistic, it's okay because you don't look like it. Like there has to be a certain type of someone looking a certain way to be, to act in that way. It's incredible that you mentioned about the work adjustments, and I've worked with many, like yourself, you work with many different organizations in some different countries as well, and it's even in the year that we're in now, there are still some very big companies doing some incredible work, and some very big companies still at that remote working side of it. And you mentioned about the commute, because what I guess people don't really understand, and I know you know this better than anyone, but that commute could really throw off the entire rest of the day. So the productivity of that they would actually want from someone who works in an organization, you're in a situation where you've been, hit with the noise, hit with the rush hour, maybe you've had to change tubes or trains, or there's traffic. It's all of these different things. So when you actually do get into the workplace, you're, I guess, so exhausted that you just think to yourself, well, I just need to kind of, just be. But as soon as you walk into that workplace, you're expected to just perform. And I think that's the most, I guess that's the trickiest part. I know I've experienced that in the past as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
You mentioned about, I know in your, in your TED talk, you mentioned about sound. And I love the fact that you did the visual side of it, of having the sound and then putting the headphones on, because that, from a dyslexic in the visual side of it, that just instantly connects me. And I feel, emotionally connected to that environment that you've created. How important? How do you manage situations where you maybe get overwhelmed with noise? Do you how are you kind of being kinder to yourself to try and, I guess, manage those environments?
Yeah. Are you just talking about just day to day or workplace specific or?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example on mine. So I always carry around my AirPods, and I literally live by them. They're literally on me all the time. So when I've done something, if I'm in an event or in a very noisy place, I will need to retreat, pop them in, and then I play classical music. So I have different music for different scenarios of how I feel. So if I'm working on a certain topic or a project, I will have this one song. I won't say what song it is, but I'll play the same song and I'll keep it on a loop, and I could listen to that same song for over an hour, and as I'm working, and it will just continuously play. The 2 minutes and 36 seconds it will play, repeat, and go on again, and I could listen to the same song for over an hour if I'm working on a certain topic. If I'm doing if I need to relax and kind of center myself, I'll listen to classical music without any voices, any lyrics. And if I'm doing more upbeat, then it will be the classical music with with the lyrics in that size. And I know you mentioned about how acute you are to listening to sounds as well. Listening to certain music, and almost taking out each instrument.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the biggest misconceptions is some people assume that so autistic people, that they are slower at processing things is because they process at a slower rate, whereas a lot of people process too much all at once. So like when I was in the office, I was processing all the background noise of, the paper rustling, pen scratching, clocks ticking, people breathing, all the while trying to concentrate on my work. A neurotypical brain typically can tune out those fine details automatically, whereas mine doesn't. And I'm similar to you. I have noise cancelling headphones that I pretty much have with me at all times, and so if I'm concentrating on work, for example, I will typically put on some even white noise, because with my because I used to perform with music. When I'm listening to even classical music, I just love hearing all the layers, and that can sometimes distract me a little bit because I get too involved in the music when I should be concentrating. So even just Spotify has loads of playlists, and you've got white noise. That can be helpful. But when I'm just even going about walking around, say in the city centre, and there's just a lot, I'm processing all the different noises around me, and also smells, and just there's a lot. So putting on some music can help me. It makes it less intense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always remember. So I put my. You mentioned about the white noise. There's this thing on Apple where you can put them into the noise cancelling, so then it plays almost like a white noise behind the other things. But as you mentioned, it then layers things, so it makes that a little bit more difficult for me, because I, like yourself, I tend to like to hear the different types of when an instrument comes in, or I know that there's going to be a beat or a change in that sense. So you can get a little bit distracted, from that. The noise cancelling side of it, though. I remember when I went to an event and I was speaking at an event, and we stayed over at a hotel previously, and there was other speakers there, and I always get a little bit nervous that that initial starting the conversation sometimes, even though I'm quite an introvert, but an extrovert, or whatever the terminology is. So I like to have conversation, but it's almost sometimes I don't like the first part. I like the second part of the conversation, the initiating. And when I went down for breakfast, there was all the other speakers and they all sat around in the other tables. And I put my headphones in because I knew that going into this environment, I just needed to kind of just be. I just wanted to go and get my breakfast. I wanted to sit. And because I knew that I was speaking later on the day, that I had to save my energy and the energy that I would give someone from talking as well. So I was almost like holding on to it to dear life, really, all this energy and my mindset. And then I started thinking to myself, I was eating my breakfast and the other speakers were looking over at breakfast. And I started thinking, oh my goodness, they might think I'm rude, and then I really got overwhelmed. So I took my headphones off and then went and sat at their table because I thought, I have to be, communicating everything else. But it was amazing because, well, it was really draining. And I think it affected the rest of my day because my mindset was, am I being rude? Have I, and I gave so much energy I felt like I gave so much energy in 20 minutes by being super social. And then when I came to the talk afterwards, I was completely exhausted. Have you been in situations like that, Katie?
Totally. I've been in a very similar situation, actually. Just a few weeks ago, I was delivering a keynote at a conference. And that meant, luckily, that I was the first on. So there wasn't a massive build-up. But when I arrived about an hour and a half early as people were getting registered and such. And the organizer had come to greet me, and there was stalls all over the place and like hundreds of people. And he said, please feel free to like mingle and chat to people. He's like, there's also a quiet area if you'd like it, but yeah, like don't feel like you need to shut yourself out from everyone. Like this is for you, these stalls are here for you as well. So I thanked him, and there was a part of me that's like, oh, if I go and shut myself away, I'm maybe coming across as rude. And then I remembered I've been asked to come speak about autism and neurodiversity. I said, this is an event where this is a really good learning tool for us all. And so I stuck to what I needed to do. So I went to this quiet room where it was just like a meeting room I had all to myself. And I put on my headphones and I just walked about a bit, kind of going over my talk. And then I was able to go through delivering my keynote. And after that, I was happier to go and speak to people because I felt like, my big part had done. So yeah, I can completely relate to what you're saying.
And I think you almost sort of took control of the situation, didn't you? And you thought to yourself, what would serve me best? And how would I be able to serve other people in a conversation and the people that's come to see the talk? And I guess there is a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves to think that we need to deliver everything in a perfect way, in that sense. But I guess, absolutely right. What you said, you do need to prioritize yourself and those surroundings. Have you been in a situation where you have done the other side of it, where you maybe early on in stages in work environments? I'll give you an example. They call it kind of like the water cooler talk, where people stand around the water cooler and they have these kind of small little chit chats. And the other thing that used to affect me a lot was the question straight away, as in, so I would walk into a work environment and maybe your boss was there or someone else, a supervisor or something, and they would ask you a question. And it could be the most simplest question ever. It could be, what did you do the weekend? Now, to me, I know in the past, I've made up so many different fibs about what I've said. I went snowboarding or skiing, or I've done this. And as soon as I say it, I realize, oh my goodness, and then I'm a little bit kind of embarrassed that I've said that. So then I continue the lie of this elaborate, and I'm like, snowboarding. Oh, it's dry slope snowboarding. It's this, and then suddenly I'm thinking, oh my god, but because it was panicked. But those, I think, on a serious note though, those situations that we're put in where we feel they ask you a question, and maybe from a work point of view as well, they'll say, how did you get on with that email? How did you get on with that call? That evokes a whole different kind of set of emotions. Have you been in those situations, Katie?
Yeah, totally. So I'm one of these people who someone asks me a question and I'll go, what? And they start to say the question again, and halfway through them retelling it, I'll go, oh, and give them my answer. I do this to my husband all the time. And he's like, why do you keep, I thought you couldn't hear me. Why are you saying what? I was like, I just needed that little bit longer to process it. It's like a reflux. And yeah, it takes a minute for me to catch up on what they've just asked and then come up with an answer. And I've learned that's maybe not the best way because it gets that kind of reaction. So what I've learned to do is to repeat the question back, and then that gives me a bit more processing time to then come up with the answer. But yes, I think it can be very difficult. I think with the way the world has changed as well, where things are a lot more instant and people, instant messaging, they're expecting a response straight away. In my last employed role, we were all remote and we were always just talking on instant messenger. And if you didn't reply even within a minute, you were kind of almost pulled up on it. It's like, oh, we need to work quickly. And I had to end up explaining I need just a moment to just process and then think of my response. So I now just acknowledge them. So if it's in person and they've asked me a question, I'll acknowledge it by saying the question back, so they know that I'm thinking and I'm not just ignoring them or whatever. And then if I message something sometimes and I don't know what the answer is, I'll just say, acknowledge that I've received it, and then I'll say I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
I think that's an incredible strategy to help in that, and you're absolutely right. There's situations like Teams, for instance. Teams has a green light, and if the green light is not showing, then I've spoken to people in the past, and they've said that oh no, I've got to keep my green light on because otherwise they'll think that I'm not working, even though, and that there has to be that kind of. Not everything that you do has to be like straight onto this. We have to have time to think, to breathe, to actually take on this information. So I think, and WhatsApp groups. I've been in WhatsApp groups, work WhatsApp groups, and friends WhatsApp groups, and they've been really difficult to keep up with, especially because within a matter of I don't know, sometimes 30 seconds to a minute, the conversation is changed 3, 4, 5 times. And so I remember going back and just scrolling down as it's filling back up, and you swipe right on the on the WhatsApp message, so you can again write the message, you resend that message. And as I'm doing this, it's just filling up and up, and I can just see it. I'm thinking, how do I keep up with this conversation? So it can be incredibly overwhelming, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've got the same with WhatsApp chats. I am, yeah. I don't love the method of communication, especially when it's like a really large group of people and there's a lot of messages happening. Yeah, it's not my favorite way to communicate.
Katie, you mentioned about early on. You mentioned about burnout and masking. Mm-hmm. Could you share that with us? Because I feel I've definitely masked in the past in so many different ways, whether it was social, whether it was work side of it. But obviously you mentioned about the burnout side of it. What was that kind of period of time like for yourself?
So autistic burnout, for anyone who doesn't really understand the term or the difference, I guess, between normal burnout and autistic burnout, autistic burnout is caused by, I guess it can be masking. So it's about us really not meeting our needs as autistic people. So we put on this mask and we're trying to meet societal norms, trying to work in a way that maybe suits other people rather than ourselves. So for me, when I used to work in an office, so when I experienced that autistic burnout before I hit that rock bottom, I was working in an office 5 days a week, and I was sitting in this shared space where there was a lot of activity. There was this bright fluorescent lighting, which really, it gave me a headache. It was so, I perceived it as so bright. There was obviously the water cooler chats, and I didn't want to be rude, so I'd partake in that. And so where I'd advocate for my needs is I don't like to work in a room with fluorescent lighting, or if I have to, which I do sometimes, it'll only be for a day, or at a minimum. Now, like in my own office, I will pretty much close the curtains, and it'll be quite a dark room, but that's where I'm most happiest and most productive. I don't have people working in the same room with me. I can completely control the environment. But when I was masking, I was working in this shared office space, and I didn't want to cause a fuss, so I just worked there. But that was putting so much strain on my brain because it was processing so much. And it was just like doing that day in, day out is utterly exhausting. So eventually, I'd come home at night and I'd be absolutely exhausted. I couldn't do my hobbies and interests because I was just drained from all that extra energy I was putting in to, I guess, masking. Like all I can describe it is just exhausting, and it's not sustainable.
So you went through, thank you for sharing that, Katie. So you went through that, and then it was kind of then understanding, how to kind of recover from that. Was that working somewhere else, or was that understanding those things, like you said, the fluorescent lighting, the noise, all the other bits and pieces? Did that then go into a change of job, a change of career, or was it?
Yes.
What was kind of the process look like from that?
Yeah, so it was a slow process. So when I hit that rock bottom, I was still working for the employer where I was working in an office 5 days a week, and on top of that, even in my social life, I was masking. So I was part of a musical theatre group, and I was performing and practicing with them every week. I was like, 20, 30 odd people, and I was putting on this persona to try and fit in with their norms, speaking a way they talked, trying to, I guess, mirror neurotypical action things. And so not only was I masking at work, I was also masking outside of work, and it was all too much, and it wasn't sustainable. So when I hit that rock bottom and I realized I was going to have to start unmasking and learning to live my life sustainably, I didn't want to start her off at work. It seemed like too big a risk. It was my livelihood. I was scared about opening up and asking for adjustments because I'd already done so and I'd been turned down. So I first looked out at my social life first. And then not too long after that, we hit the coronavirus pandemic. And then we were forced to move everything online. And then that kind of showed me I was remote working. And all of a sudden, I felt like this weight had been lifted from my shoulders because I was in an environment I could control. So I understand like the coronavirus pandemic was difficult for a lot of people, but personally, it showed me this alternative way of working, and it worked really well for me. And during the pandemic, I moved to a different role where I could work remotely full time even after the pandemic was over. So yes, I first started with my social life first before looking into my professional life, and it just all sort of worked out.
It's an incredible journey, and I think, if we look back around kind of, when, the pandemic happened, if we were to sit down with our organization and say, actually, I now want to start remote working, I mean, like I said, I always try and think of something good. I completely understand how it affected people on a global scale, and I understand that, and it's affected so many different people. And I always try and find something good out of something. I guess that's just a positive mentality of the way that I see the world. But I think that the fact that remote working is now a thing, as in we can discuss it and people know what it is, it does open up the chain of conversation to see if an organization is more happy to consider it. I think if we would have went back, say, 3 years ago or 4 years ago and said to an organization, I like the job, I'll work 5 days, but 3 of them, I want to be at home, I think it would have been a lot. I'm not saying it's easy now, but I think it would have been a lot more of a difficult conversation to have throughout that.
Yes, totally. And one thing I should note as well, I keep talking about remote working and it is wonderful, but now, so I'm self-employed and I'm a trainer and a speaker. So I often go out and work in environments that I don't have control over. But I guess having those months, years of remote working, it gave me that confidence for advocating for myself and for also learning what works for me. So yeah, we can absolutely have a mix. And I guess it's just about, instead of trying to get everyone to fit this mold that we had done for many, many decades, it's about looking at each individual and seeing what their preferences and needs are. And it's not just neurodivergent people that can benefit from like remote working, hybrid working. I think like everyone can. Everyone's got their own preferences. My husband, he isn't neurodivergent, but he likes having working from home days because he has no distractions. And you know what, like when you're in an office and you want to catch up with, people in your team, and you go to grab a coffee and then half an hour later you finally get back to your desk, and then once you're at home you can properly shut out and focus. So I think it's not just looking at us as having like special needs. I think it can benefit like every single worker. That's what I would love people more to talk about, to be aware of as well.
Absolutely, and I think when we mentioned about the remote working, it's funny, isn't it? Because what you've essentially done is created, when you were in that situation that it became difficult in the sense of the fluorescent lighting, other bits and pieces. What you've done effectively is created a working environment that works for you in a different place, which is your home. So wouldn't it be amazing if organizations were able to think, actually, this is what, softer lighting, quieter pods, whatever that looks like, let's open up the forum, let's have these discussions, maybe bring in experts, I say experts, but people with lived experiences of what this is like. And I love the fact that you mentioned on the fact that, it's for everyone. Because it is, as a collective. If you looked at an organization, it's about the whole team, and it's how everyone works together, in coherence for that. So I think it's important for an organization to relook at the structure of their business and think, how can we best involve the entire team? And if that means we may have to trust someone that they're gonna, when they say they're gonna work, and not penalize them just because they can't work in the environment that they've created. So I implore this massively as well, that it needs to be a topic of the conversation. It needs to be something that they go back and look at the structure of their organization in their handbooks, whatever this looks like. And I think it also needs to be is a point of conversation of when you're looking to hire someone into the organization. You look back many years ago, they would frown if you needed certain, had certain responsibilities at home, or if you had certain things that you had to leave work earlier to do the school run, or other bits and pieces. Even though 9 times out of 10, people who left earlier would continue to work throughout the night in fear of not missing that 45 minutes or something. So they end up working 2-3 hours extra every day anyway. So I think it's as a whole, I think an organization that is being negative in the sense that we're not changing, that is the way. With the way that staff staff turnover is at the moment, and people, the long-term longevity of someone staying in an organization now is different to what it was 30 years ago. Someone would join an organization, stay in that organization, retire and leave. That's not the case now. We do have many options. Yourself, successfully setting up your own businesses, working for yourself, going for an organization. There's more choice in this. And I think if organizations want to play a part in the next 5-10 years of people like yourself and people, that are coming through, I think change definitely needs to happen. That's just my view.
And I completely agree with it as well. Yeah, totally.
So you are the founder of Autistic Flair. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So Autistic Flair started as this. Well, really, it started as a blog. It's where I started a website, an Instagram page, somewhere I could explore my autistic identity and talk about my experiences growing up autistic and neurodivergent. And it was through that so the social media started to take off. And I was listening to others' experiences and stories. And it wasn't just people that looked like me, it was people of all walks of life. It ranged from teenagers to pensioners, unemployed folks and professionals, people all across the world. And it showed me the true diversity of autism and neurodiversity. But we all seem to have one commonality, and that was barriers to education, employment, and happiness. And the barrier, it wasn't autism or neurodiversity. It was a lot of the time like societal attitudes and misconceptions. And I thought about what shapes